We must be the great arsenal of democracy. For us, this is an emergency as serious as war itself.
So you look at the world today, and we are in an undeclared state of emergency. We have North Korean generals getting wounded in Ukraine. We've had a pogrom in Israel. We have phase zero gray zone operations in the South China Sea. Counterfactually, what more would have to happen for us to say that we are on the precipice of World War III, and what do we need to do to deter it?
The balance of power is shifting away from America in all three theaters of the world that matter across Eurasia and the Middle East, and that's partly because our conventional deterrent isn't credible, or we're not there because the military is so small.
How did we lose deterrence? What happened to Pax Americana? And when I look at the industrial base, I see that we've lost our way.
With the collapse of the Soviet Union, the U.S. went into this shedding its industrial base, what was called the Last Supper, where the Defense Department essentially tells private industry to consolidate. The U.S. defense industrial base is still largely on a peacetime footing. So the bureaucracy involved in it, the contracting system, it's ancient.
The DoD violates pretty much every rule in modern product development. The spec is developed and is finalized before production starts. The way you really do it is you start it iteratively and you learn from your mistakes and so forth. That's called agile development. It's essentially impossible to do because of the way the rules are set.
I think monopsony is the root of what ails us. At some very fundamental level, you either believe in the free market or you don't. The consolidation bred conformity. It pushed out the Kelly Johnsons. It pushed out the crazy innovative engineers. It pushed out the founders. And it was the beginning of the true financialization of defense, where these companies became owned by an institutional faceless class that only cared about dividends and buybacks. You don't have the Elon Musk. You don't have the Palmer Luckies.
And while I believe we all agree on the urgency to innovate, I must say one of the most serious obstacles to doing so has been the lack of stable, predictable, timely funding.
The system is not producing weapons systems for a protracted war against a major adversary like China.
As the tension between Taiwan and China is growing, top military analysts warn that an invasion could cost many American lives.
A war game from the Center for Strategic and International Studies begins with a Chinese missile barrage against Taiwan's military in 2026, destroying much of its air force and navy. The war game assesses that the U.S. loses 10 to 20 combat ships, including 2 aircraft carriers, and 200 to 400 military aircraft. In 3 weeks of fighting, the U.S. suffers more than 3,000 troops killed in action.
Results and recommendations are the Chinese forces makes this successful landing. U.S.-Taiwan forces exhausted available missiles and ammunition within days in the simulation. Bold and aggressive steps are needed to take and rebuild U.S. defense industrial base and boost production capability and capacity to deter war.
And it's a competition. We win and they lose. And there is only one way to do that, and that is to build the defense industrial capacity that you deter adversaries that are on a wartime footing. But you have to make that case to the American population. You have to make that case and tell them what is at stake. I have not heard anyone make that case. It needs to be made. It was made by Roosevelt in the 1930s. It was made by Reagan in the 1980s. It can be made again in the 2020s.
I have the profound conviction that the American people are now determined to put forth a mightier effort than they have ever yet made to increase our production of all the implements of defense to meet the threat to our democratic faith.